and welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here. All 5 of you in the room today. It means a lot to me to be kicking off our first and hopefully only virtual She Tells Sea Tales. My name is Kelly Watson, and I am very proud to have been one of the people who started the Girls Boat Project and the founder of She Tells Sea Tales. If you are unfamiliar with that event, it was started as a fundraiser to be a one-hit wonder for the Girls Boat Project, where once a year we would have the opportunity to come together, support the Girls Boat Project, which is a sailing and woodworking program for young women. She Tells Sea Tales came to me one morning laying in bed as an opportunity to kind of expand on what Fisher Poets does and to create a place for women to use their voices to share their experiences as mariners. As we all know, there are not as many women mariners as there are male mariners, and this is an opportunity to kind of highlight our work. So I am very excited about our lineup this evening. We have Bonnie Obremski, Rachel Slattery, Naja Chimenti, Nancy Early, and Jean Scarborough. Round of applause for them. You may notice that some of these speakers have spoken before. That is because you are attending the first ever She Tells Sea Tales Wooden Boat Festival edition of the event. Please mark your calendars, and I know that they are pretty empty right now. 4 tickets go on sale February 14th for the March 8th International Women's Day original She Tells Sea Tales event, which will be our 7th annual event coming in 2021. When Barb Traylor has been asking me year after year to do She Tells Sea Tales at the Wooden Boat Festival, and I say to her, She Tells Sea Tales usually needs to be in the dark period of the winter when we all come together and hide out inside, and in the fall is the time to be out in the water. This is a strange time, and that is why you are having this wonderful opportunity to participate this year in She Tells Sea Tales. Okay, without further ado, I am so excited to introduce to you Nancy Early. I met Nancy through She Tells Sea Tales. She was a legend. She is one of the incredible mariners in Port Townsend who's paved the way for those of us who followed in her wake. She has led 2 circumnavigations around the globe and was notable, is according to George Day, publisher of the Blue Water Sailing Magazine, for the lack of disasters that her circumnavigations had. Often the books that you read about the high seas are not done so competently. So we are so excited to have Nancy, who has won the Leadership in Women's Sailing Award by Boat US and National Women's Sailing Association. She holds her 100-ton Masters Ocean license. She's an instructor evaluator for the International Sail and Power Association, a ham radio operator, and you too can join her aboard Tethys. Look her up on the World Wide Web. And without further ado, let's welcome Nancy Early.
I'm Nancy Early from Port Townsend, Washington. From 1989 to 2001, I took my 38-foot sailboat Tethys around the world. Well, it took me around the world, really. 65 different women participated as the crew on the various legs of the voyage, as I used Tethys as a learning platform for women sailors. It was 2 5-year trips. I want to share with you one of the more unusual things that occurred on our slowly unfolding adventure. Of the 10 years out offshore cruising, this is the story of all stories, the 40 Camels story. Suakin in northern Sudan is an excellent port in the Red Sea, and it's on the left-hand side, roughly halfway up as you travel the 1,000 miles up the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean, from the Indian Ocean. It was initially developed 3,000 years ago as a trading and exploration port. 1,000 years later, it became a main port for Africans making their way to Mecca, which is nearly across from it in the Red Sea. During the Middle Ages, so much trade passed through the port that it became very wealthy in the height of medieval luxury on the Red Sea. In 1517, the Ottomans occupied Suakin and began making the buildings of coral with walls decorated with intricate stone and wood carvings. In the 19th century, it became the primary slave trade port in Eastern Africa, abandoned around 1920 after slave trade diminished. The exquisite coral buildings were left to ruin, and ruin they were in 1993 when we anchored Tethys in the harbor. To our surprise, the Colonel of Immigration, the man in charge, will hold our passports for the duration of our stay. We aren't singled out. This is the case for all the visiting boats. It's unprecedented in our travels and very disconcerting. It means we can't leave whenever we want to. It's hot and dry. The ruined coral buildings come right near the water's edge. We're anchored in a crumbling ghost city. Feral children play in the ruins. They jump from the walls into our dinghies that are tied up while we're ashore. I come back to find them bouncing up and down on the pontoons and twisting the throttle of the outboard. Rather than yell and shoo them off, as my fellow cruisers are doing, I invite them for a dinghy ride. 8 of the little urchins are all I can fit aboard, and off we go. The young ringleader insists on holding onto the throttle, so I let him put his hand behind mine. We head out into the anchorage, and the boys start singing. Loud, joyous singing. Heads pop up out of the cruising boats as we pass, and one waves us over. They hand out cookies. It's like we're trick-or-treating. Another boat hears the singing and calls us over. What a joyride that was for me. None of us wanted it to end. A curfew is in force in Suakin. No one is to be out after dark. We've been greeted and welcomed to town by Awad, an English-speaking local. I said, Awad, how do you spell that? He said, you know, like the American name, Howard. I said, oh, Awad. He acts roughly as a concierge who helps us get fresh water, fuel, money exchange, and all the necessaries. The water comes by a 55-gallon drum on wheels pulled by a donkey. Each boat takes some in their dinghies by jugs back to the boats. According to the boats that got water the next day, our water has less sand in it. One of the American boats, Azura, asks Awad for 2 chickens to cook. He brings them the next day, alive. Not exactly what they had in mind. Awad wants us to meet his wife and family and come for dinner. It will be a walk out of town after curfew. We go, but early on feel we might have made a mistake. It's dark. We have no clue where we are or how far it is, and no way to get help. Awad has our flashlight and leads the way. It turns out to be 2 miles. We get to his village with tall wooden walls around each house. He opens one of the walls and we're at his home. Their possessions are 1 bed, 1 lamp, 1 communal bowl we all eat from with our right hand, and 1 cup. He motions us to sit on the bed. There are no chairs. We get water from another one of the 55-gallon drums, and I'm quite sure that's where we got the giardia. Everyone in the village drinks from the same scoop. The giardia was eventually easily cured by a $3 over-the-counter medicine, Flagyl, in Egypt. Evening found us fascinated with each other, although only Awad spoke English. His wife and sisters plaited our hair. They made us coffee from green coffee beans that they roasted over a fire. Half sugar and half super strong coffee got the heart racing. I don't remember sneaking home, but we must not have gotten caught. One evening, which turns out to be our last in Suakin, we're shopping in the modest stalls in town, and just before curfew, a uniformed soldier comes to me and motions me to follow him. I don't immediately, and he makes it clear that the colonel wants to see me. What? Our crew has an agreement that we won't be separated. We will stick together like the 3 Musketeers. But I was to come alone with the soldier, and so I did. The colonel's office is a Quonset hut. The soldier stands guard at the outside of the door and motions me to go in. The colonel, in full uniform, sits behind his desk facing the door. He points to the chair in front of his desk for me to sit, which I do. It's air-conditioned, and I'm cold and nervous. He's rather good-looking and has sparkly blue eyes. A bead of sweat is trickling down his right temple. He says, I want to offer you 40 camels for your crew, Sue McNabb, to be my 4th wife. Uh-oh. Several thoughts race through my head in the next breath or two. What to do is one of them. You've got a deal is not one of them. I think beads of sweat started to trickle down my temples about now, too. The thought of our passports flicks through my mind a few times. what to do. Time is standing still. Sue is a fine woman, charismatic, generous and fun, smart, a leader, long dark hair, and shall I say, well-proportioned and pleasing in figure. We've been friends since we were 16-year-old counselors at Girl Scout camp in Wisconsin. I'm not sure she wants to be this man's fourth wife. The colonel is the highest-ranking guy in town, the big cheese. I'm thinking this is a lot of camels and likely a very generous offering. How not to offend and get out with our passports. It's time. I stand up, look him directly in the eyes, and hold the eye contact. I thank him for his offer and slowly say, but I must have Sue aboard as crew to get our boat back home to Seattle. I let his eyes go and turn and walk out the door. Holy shit. I scurry back to the boat and have a fairly hilarious late-night chat with Sue and Patty. We figure he would normally negotiate with the father for the daughter's hand, and lacking that and no brothers, the next best person of authority is the captain. The poor guy got me. And I was right. Sue doesn't want to be the colonel's fourth wife, or even his first, although it's too late for that. We agree an early departure is in order, and as captain, I will pick up the passports as soon as the station opens. I go in the morning while the gals get the boat prepped to depart. I come back empty-handed. For our boat, everyone has to show up in person to get her passport. He wanted another look at Sue. I suggest she resist the urge to flirt. We get the passports and are out of there, but not without Giardia, whose symptoms we will notice in a week or so. Thank you.
It is my extreme honor to introduce our next reader, Naja Chimenti. I first met Naja when she was sailing aboard Schooner Adventurous as an 8-year-old. She was far more adept at sailing than I was, scampering up and down the rigging, furling sails. I was able to learn a lot from her, and that is still true today. Naja is a licensed mariner, runs her family's sailmaking business on Marrowstone Island, and is an incredible and competent mariner who works at the Community Boat Project, rigging, sailmaking, and oh so many other things. So please give Naja Chimenti a warm welcome.
This piece is called Sistership. It is about a very special relationship I have with a very special vessel in my life. My mother wanted very much to conceive a child. She tried for a long time. There were doctors and scheduling and supplements involved, but to no avail. Then, in the last year of 1987, my parents received a very special opportunity, the chance to participate in the building of a brand new tall ship in Seattle. Her hull had been fabricated in a small yard in Whidbey Island, then brought to Lake Union to be fitted out. Deck houses, interior, rigging, systems, etc. My parents were part of the small team assembled to build the rig and all of her sails. Now, there is a special magic about boats that is particularly strong in sailing ships and working ships. Somehow, they are given life. The energy of all the many people that participate in her construction, the many hands that touch her every part, the many lives that are lived inside of her, animate her. Every bulkhead, every line, every spar is infused with laughter and pain, with teaching and learning, with frustration and hope. All of this gradually comes together and becomes a being of its own. Over the course of 2 years, my parents were part of the crew bringing to life this entity of steel bones, fiber sinews, and canvas wings. Finally, on one fine day in the fall of '88, she left the uterus of the lake, traveled down the ship canal, and was born into Puget Sound in all her full-fledged glory. Her newly minted high clipper bow cut the waves, bowsprit standing proud 20 feet above the water. 15 white canvas sails gleamed in the sun, and her teak decks and cabin sides shone. But below decks, there were no plush staterooms or comfy saloons. No, back aft, there were small but serviceable crew quarters for her complement of 23, alongside a walk-in freezer and 3-door fridge. Amidships, one of the most comfortable engine rooms to grace a tall ship, with her great engine, 2 generators, desalinator, and all the necessary machinery for an ocean-going vessel. But the forecastle was unusual. Up forward, there was an examining room, a laboratory, X-ray room, a small dental clinic, and all the equipment of a mobile healthcare center. For this ship was built for a purpose. She was to bring healthcare service to the far-flung Marshall Islands, a string of atolls that are sprinkled across a few thousand square miles of the eastern Pacific. She was christened Tullamore, which in Marshallese means gift of life and health. Once the sea trials were done, the Coast Guard inspections complete, my parents had the honor of being part of the crew for the square topsail schooner Tullamore's maiden voyage from Washington to Hawaii. My mother, caught up in the all-consuming nature of the project and the voyage, had let go her hopes and worries. So, when, while furling the lower topsail aloft during the trip, she felt a sharp pain in her belly, she assumed she had a budding hernia. Upon arrival in Hawaii, she went to the doctor with that expectation and was quite surprised to hear him say, "Have you considered you might be pregnant?" Her happiness was complete. The sea had done what the doctors could not, and thus it was that new life gave rise to new life, and my story became inextricably entwined with that of my sister ship. My father, meantime, was offered the position of part-time captain of Tullamore. The next 3 years were spent, half of each year living aboard her, sailing between Hawaii and the various many atolls of the Marshalls. The other half saw us back in Washington, building our new home. Now, would you sit down with me and look through an old photo album or two? Let's take a peek at some of my favorite images. Look, here you see Tolle racing down the waves towards Diamond Head. All her sails are drawing deep, save the mizzen. It is only halfway up, just being set. This is from her maiden voyage, when she first arrived in Hawaii. The captain wants her to enter Honolulu under full sail. Doesn't she look grand? Here's my first trip on the ship as an independent being. I think I'm about 7 months old, just about starting to walk. I'm using the wheel to hold myself up, my head about level with the hub at the center, trying to steer already, but my entire body weight is not enough to turn the great spokes. My father, on all fours, hovers protectively near. This is one of my favorites. held lovingly in my mother's arms, we both gaze out to the horizon. The gentle evening breeze blows our hair back out of our faces. The golden light washes over mother, baby, and rigging. I can almost hear the wake rushing along the side just beyond the rail. It's deck wash time. Gosh, I must be about 1 year old, but there I am, scrubbing the deck like everyone else. I'm looking at the camera like, hey, can't you see I'm busy here? In the background, a bucket, a hose, and a bunch of grown-up legs standing around. Soon after that, I found it was much more fun to scrub Papa than to scrub the deck. That's me in the lap of Uncle Jokage, with his sweet smile, white teeth flashing against dusky skin. One of the innumerable Marshallese, both crew and islanders, that adopted me on sight. With my blonde curls, gregarious nature, and total lack of fear of strangers, I won everyone's hearts. They called me the Sea Mouse, after that child's crew the Dutch fishermen used to have. This one must be about a year later. See, I have pigtails now, and I'm wearing clothes. Well, some anyways. Tensions are running high on the aft deck racetrack. Hermit crab racing, that is. The crew are all crowded around with their beers, cheering on their favorites, and me, I sit just like them, clutching my soda can, one of the gang. But it's not all fun and games. Here, crew member Johnny Freeberg patiently holds a rigging block steady for me as, frowning with concentration, I carefully work the sandpaper over the wooden cheek. And here, the whole family sits on the deck cleaning conch shells. As meticulous as my parents, I attack the cracks and crevices with a toothed brush. Look, it's finally my 3rd birthday. I've been looking forward to this day for months because my parents said I couldn't climb a loft until I turned 3. Now that day has finally arrived, and I have not let them forget their promise. So my mother sewed me a tiny little harness and tethered to my father, but climbing all under my own steam, I ascend the Ratlins for the first time. The gaps between the steps are almost half as tall as me, but I am undaunted and I make my way all the way up to the 4 cross trees where friends await with a bottle of champagne. Look at that fierce, proud look I give the camera after I made it to the top. Just 3 years old, and already I have learned I can achieve anything I put my mind to. Hey, it's Easter! With beribboned basket in hand, I trip gaily about the deck in search of colored eggs and marshmallow peeps hidden under life rafts, in portholes, and all the delightful nooks a tall ship has to offer. So many memories preserved in these pages. Sailing through squalls in a raincoat that came down to my toes, watching a lava flow off of Big Island. But the glorious years of sun and fun in the far-off reaches of the Pacific did not last. After 4 years, the healthcare contract was not renewed due to political issues, and Tole moved on to a different purpose. She was to take youth at risk and juveniles out of lockup on trips around the Hawaiian Islands. After the first of these trips, my father decided this was no place for a family with a small child, and he took a job closer to home with the schooner Adventurous. For many years, Tole and I sailed on different life paths. Then, by a lucky twist, when I was 12, our courses converged again. A new organization had recently taken on my sister ship and brought her to California for sail training and school groups and summer campers. They asked my father to come down as captain for their first season and get the show running smoothly. I got to come along as ship's apprentice. Over the next 3 months, I learned all the duties of a full-fledged crew member, from furling the square topsails in the gathering night to scrubbing the heads until they were spotless and the eye-watering smell of cleaner drove me out of the confined space. Here are a few moments from the best of my Rites of Passage album. There was Halloween, when I begged them to turn Tole into a haunted ship for the night. To my great surprise, they put me in charge of the makeover, seeing as how I was so inspired. We filled the forward bunk rooms with fog, chains, and scary people under hatches. In the aft cabins, there was trick-or-treating, but be careful. You might find candy in that bucket, or perhaps pickled skin, unnamed organs, or eyeballs, kelp, oily spaghetti, and peeled grapes. See how she rides her anchor in the light of the waning moon, a hanged man off of one yardarm, a ghost off of the other. Now it's history lesson time. A bunch of middle schoolers listen raptly as my father explains the origin of the dead horse ceremony. Shortly, I will hang our rope and cardboard horse effigy from the yardarm. As he spins his enthralling tale, I stand by eagerly in my harness, ready to leap into the rigging. Here is one that gives me chills. It reminds me of an image out of some epic myth. The wind blows my long, loose hair back from my face in gleaming chestnut waves as I raise a conch shell to my lips and blow a long, clear note. Tole's white rig and sails stand out bright and sharp against a sky so deep and blue, it makes my heart ache. Beyond the stern stretches the wide sweep of blue sea, broken only by one small white island. Now this is a particularly proud moment for my father, and I am proud to be able to share it with him. As we stand on the foredeck of Tullamore, a ship whose rig and sails he built with his own hands, our path crosses that of the Robert C. Seamans, another ship for whom he was the head rigger and whose sails our family sewed. In that moment, watching those elegant ladies of the sea as they bow to each other across the waves, watching the look on my father's face, I wonder what works of my own hands I will look upon someday. Will they be so grand? Not likely. I grew up a tremendous amount in those 3 months, and in the year that followed, and so did Tullamore. The program that she ran for the next several years was legend amongst the tall ship circuit. 1 to 2 or 3 week trips around the Channel Islands, snorkeling in the morning, sailing afternoon. Her crew were manifold, and to this day, they still speak of those years as some of the best. I was inspired by my reconnection with my sister ship and wished to spend more time with her. So when I was 15, I orchestrated a return without parental units for a 5-week stint. On my own, really, for the first time. I made new friends, tested my skills and my boundaries. My proudest moment was when I was sent aloft to furl the lower topsail. The captain said he would send more crew to help me once the ship was docked, but he never did. I wrestled 800 feet, square feet, of canvas slowly but steadily into submission, sometimes standing on top of the yard to get the leverage I needed. When I was done, a couple of hours later, it was as ship-shape a furl as you could wish, invisible from the deck with the clews neatly tucked. Sadly, that was my last day sailing aboard Tullamore. I've been back to her for a couple of brief visits as a professional for rigging work. In recent years, she has moved on to yet another life, pleasure cruises in the Caribbean. Many bemoan her fate, for of all of her trades to date, this is perhaps the least noble. And worse yet, they changed her name. Gift of life and health no more, she now plies the seas as Vela, ship of the stars. Yet, many vessels have met a worse fate. In a time when many tall ships struggle to stay alive, often sinking into disrepair and from there to derelict oblivion, like the lonely, forgotten denizens of a nursing home. Yet, Vela still sails, still tosses her masts at palm-covered islands, still stirs the hearts of all those lucky enough to cross her decks. And I am lucky enough to still be connected with her. Unlike so many, for whom she is now a dream of faded glory days. I now run my parents' business, making sails for tall ships, and we are honored to say that we have made every sail Tolle has ever set. For nearly 35 years, we have built the wings that carry her over the waves. Now, though we may be thousands of miles apart, I feel the connection with her in every stitch I take, every thread I snap tight, every rope I whip and splice, knowing I am touching a part of her, binding her soul to mine. My sister ship, the ship of my heart.
It is my honor to welcome up next a very dear friend of mine, Jean Scarborough. I first met Jean on her tugboat that she lived on in Seattle, just outside of the Center for Wooden Boat Harbor. Center for Wooden Boats in Seattle. Jean is a mariner who always has fun, mostly does it for fun, her bio says, and every now and again gets paid to do that, including when she started teaching women how to sail program at the Center for Wooden Boats. She is a talented mariner, an awesome mom, partner, a clinical director for Jumping Mouse, and an all-around great human being, Jean Scarborough. Am I going? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, this is an old She Tells Sea Tales reading that I did some years ago. And it's called Hermit Crabbing in the Philippines. And hermit crabbing is a term my husband and I came up with for flying to some other area, buying a boat, fixing it up, having a sailing trip on it, and then selling the boat when we leave. This is our very first time doing this. This was our honeymoon. It's nearly dawn. The wind and the waves are asleep. We are standing on Columbion Island, looking across the bay at the beginnings of a spectacular mountain sunrise. The Filipino fishermen camped here are a mere 100 feet away. Still, the language barrier leaves us fundamentally alone. Our boat, a Filipino banca, we bought and fixed up just 3 weeks ago, sits next to us on the sand. Its light blue, spindly body, 18 feet long and 26 inches at the widest point, is tilted to the side. The weight of it rests on one of its bright pink bamboo outriggers. The stick-thin plywood and small lawnmower engine, coupled with the boat's improbably narrow hull, seem especially ominous in the early morning light. I look across the bay again. My husband and I are not talking as we drink our treasured instant Nescafe. We are both acutely aware of the abyss we are contemplating. We have made our decision. We are here, awake and ready to go. Yet we are each silently asking ourselves one more time, is this worth it? Jake puts his blue tin mug down. He walks to the side of the boat and checks the lashings. We have relashed the outriggers many times these past weeks. I know he tightened them last night. I'm not ready for this. It is one small gesture, but it's moving us directly from should we really do this to one last safety check before departure mode, and I am just not ready. I pick up his mug and walk to the water's edge. He is always ready before I am. I know he is giving me time, gently waiting for me to come around. I say to him, "The weather is looking good for now." "Yeah," he agrees, "it's perfect." "I guess this is our window." "Definitely." "Are we really going to do this?" He looks at me and says, "This is totally crazy." His big, beautiful eyes are on fire with anticipation. This is not the first time I have wanted to put my tail between my legs and run the other way. This entire trip, the very idea of it to this daunting moment has challenged my psychological and physical homeostasis. When Jake first suggested it, fly to the Philippines, buy a tiny boat he found on Craigslist for $600, and sail it around for 6 weeks, I jumped in with a litany of questions about how the trip would work. How much would it cost? Where would we find supplies and tools? What would we do if the boat was a piece of junk? How about when we knew for sure that the boat was a piece of junk? Yet here I am, weeks into this journey, and once again, I am shutting out my urge for sanity and comfort to embrace the expansive opportunity that lies within challenge. I leave the water's edge to join Jake. Our boat, Saduts, named after our canoe carving Haida friend who blessed this trip for us, is packed and ready to go. I shove the rinsed mugs into our galley dry bag, roll it shut, and secure it to the boat. The morning air is chilly. I put on my bright orange vest over sun layers, make sure I have my sun hat and sunglasses and water bottle ready, and look Jake directly in the eyes. I am looking for any sign that he is wavering, any bit of hesitance. I see none. I feel lighter. "Okay," I finally say, more to myself than to him. "Okay, let's go." We have been in so many unbelievable situations since this trip began, I cannot keep track. Just the bags we packed were ridiculous, going through airport security with hand drills and saws and splash zone and canvas sails. Then there was the constant loading and unloading of large, uncooperative pieces of plywood and other boat supplies onto small Filipino tricycles and walking with these unlikely things down a long, winding dirt road that led between mazes of cement houses and scraggly stray dogs and our Filipino fans who delighted in watching two foreigners fix up a banca for vacation. There was the realization when I went to register the boat that we were the first people, as far as anyone knew, wanting to take a banca belonging to the province of Cavite out of the area. And there was the loading of our boat and ourselves onto a ferry line that is infamous for fires and sinkings and passenger deaths just to get further south. Never before have I walked miles in the hot sun to deliver boat supplies while children in dusty flip-flops ran around me chanting, "Saduts, Saduts, Saduts," after the name of my flimsy, skinny new boat. Never before have I navigated the raw sewage of 1.6 million people to load a banca onto a questionable ferry in Manila Bay. And never again, I am certain, will I meet with the mayor of 88,000 people to ask for permission to take a small fishing boat into new waters. These details matter. They are how I fell in love with Saduts. And being in love with a boat is critical to any sea journey because love involves trust. I would not take a boat I do not trust into potentially dangerous waters. But the problem with love is that it's not always logical. It can be rooted in experiences that bring a sense of accomplishment and excitement, even if these experiences have nothing to do with safety. I love this boat because of the unique story that comes along with it. I love this boat because we have already spent 3 weeks working and traveling on it and taking risks with it. I love this boat because Jake is on it with me. I love this boat too because of the people. After our first calamitous launching, where we made it only 1 hour north before strong winds created enough chop to flood our tiny engine, and we were forced to sail back downwind to the very same beach we had just left, we were welcomed like family. The boat, being about as wide as it is long if you count the bamboo outriggers, is hard to turn when you're beamed to. Mercifully, we had a paddle made of scrap wood tied to a cut-up hatch that a practical Filipino man had made for us before we left. After 20 minutes of madly paddling, I was able to turn the boat downwind. Jake jerry-rigged a halyard and hoisted the sail that he made back in Seattle, which turned out to be outrageously large for the boat. It made enormous noises as it flogged back and forth, the sheet pulling hard and tearing into the skin of my palm. Jake holding onto the halyard and using every ounce of strength to keep the sail high. We had failed. We looked absurd, but nobody laughed. 10 men helped us pull the boat ashore. Before we knew what was happening, our belongings were taken off the boat and hung to dry. 3 men removed our engine to troubleshoot it, and 3 more were sawing up wood for hatches where hatches were missing. We stayed in this community for 4 more days to work on the boat. A family on the beach offered us a bed and fed us 3 meals a day. I have never experienced such unequivocal and selfless generosity from strangers, most of whom could not speak my language, and all of whom categorically live with less money and resources than most of the poorest Americans. By the end of our time in Labat Cavite, we had more freeboard, smaller sails, a new paint job, actually watertight hatches, a bilge pump made of PVC pipe, a stick, and a t-shirt, a cleaned and freshly painted engine, bigger bamboo outriggers, and the kindness of people that we will remember for the rest of our lives. How could I not fall in love? Jake lifts the bow of our boat, and I shove a fender underneath. We each grab a talapa and begin crab-walking Saduts down the beach. It's the only way we can get this heavy, spidery creature into the water without the help of many hands, and it is always awkward and trying. We have been taking trips on small boats in remote places for years, rowing and sailing around islands for days or weeks at a time. But a heavy boat with a lawnmower engine is new to me. We have never done a small boat trip with an engine on board. Still, somehow, I have come to love the tradition of shoving cotton balls in my ears to drown out the noise of the engine. I look forward to sitting behind the bright red contraption without a muffler and the challenge of shifting my body while I steer so that the heat of the exhaust doesn't burn my skin or melt my polyester clothes. And I can finally laugh when we yell over the roar of this little beast to comment on the beauty of the area. Somehow this doesn't feel like nature. What? Nature, yes! Habituation is remarkable. Saduts lifts as we float her farther into the water. Jake climbs aboard. I hold the bow steady. I jump on and Jake pull starts the engine before the mild morning waves push us back to shore. We immediately shoot forward. There is no neutral or reverse with a lawnmower engine, only forward. Jake sets our speed by adjusting the throttle, a piece of foam nailed to the side of the boat and wrapped in fishing line connected to the carburetor. He finds the sweet spot for our little engine, and once again we are lulled into the daily rhythm of our Philippine honeymoon. I almost feel complacent in this moment. It is so familiar now. I lean over and dip my hand into the warm ocean water to watch the bioluminescence trail off my fingers. I look back one last time at the fishermen camped along the beach, dotting the shoreline, and I proudly think to myself that if they can navigate these waters in such small boats, then so can we. I turn back to face the horizon. Once we leave this little bay, we are committed. There is no turning back, no stopping midway. There is only forward. Over the last week, we have gotten mixed advice. One man was so concerned, he bought us disposable cell phones because our VHF radio is useless in the Philippines. No one else has one. He programmed his number into our phones. He cautioned that a ferry boat, much bigger and sturdier than ours, had been split in 2 just weeks before on the same crossing. Split in 2! He shook 2 fingers at us to emphasize the point. Then he asked, "Why aren't these islands enough for you?" Well, that's a difficult question to answer. We have traveled almost 7,000 miles by air, bus, ferry, and banca to get here. We have endured sunburns and food poisoning and camp meals full of sand. We have spent money, time, and energy rising to countless challenges, and we are now only 36 miles away from the Palawan province. Palawan, the inspiration for this entire trip. An area in the Philippines home to 2 World Heritage Sites with 1,200 miles of coastline and 1,800 islands and islets. Palawan is full of rocky coves, white sand beaches, virgin forests, green mountain peaks, and limestone rocks that jump hundreds of feet high straight up out of crystal blue water. And the last barrier between us and this paradise is where the Sulu and the South China Seas collide. We motor for a mile as the sun slowly rises. We had intended to leave at 5 this morning, well before slack, but there is no electricity in the area and the darkness was consuming. We've already had near misses with other unlit fishing boats and a near sinking after getting a thick, unmarked oyster net wrapped around our prop at night. So in the face of local wisdom, we chose to wait. It is nearly 6:30 as we round the point to enter Linapakan Strait. There is 1 hour left of a waning ebb before slack tide. As soon as we hit the strait, swells from the South China Sea start rolling underneath from the northwest. I have never been in ocean swells before. Most of the small boating we do is in relatively protected waters. At first, the swells feel smooth and relaxing. As they rise to 6 feet, I begin to feel uneasy. Jake is trying to figure out how to ride them. Sedut's is so wide that when we take them on the corner of the bow, we are still dug in at the opposite corner in the stern, racking the boat in a twisting motion before we slam into the trough after each surge. It is very unnerving, and it is not long before the opposing swells from the Sulu Sea start undulating in from the south. Jake eventually settles us beam to the waves, and although it is counterintuitive, it is just where Sedut's wants to be, riding through the trough. We travel this way for 10 miles until we reach a handful of tiny islets perched in the middle of our crossing. This is our only shelter from the swells. We putter into a little bay on the northwest side of Linapakan Island. It's 9:30 in the morning. It's been 3 hours since we left. We're only a third of the way to our destination. We were told the entire voyage would take 6 hours by the same fisherman who shrugged indifferently when asked if our boat could make this journey safely. The charts we have for this area are minimal, to say the least. They are black and white copies, 30-plus years old, Admiralty piloted charts, the best we could find for the area, but lacking in any kind of information we are accustomed to relying on. Luckily, our boat draws virtually nothing, but I am still pining for the finer details like depths, tidal rocks, and reefs, let alone the luxury of current speed and direction. We have not seen one buoy. We are navigating mostly by crude charts, conflicting local knowledge, and what we can see in front of us. I would not teach anyone to boat this way. We rig up our sun tarp. Jake refills our day tank from the jerry can by sucking on a plastic tube to siphon the gas. We figure it is still early enough in the day for us to make good time before the wind builds, and we hope to make the final crossing at the next slack tide. I steer us away from Linapakan Island and back into the rolling seas. Now that I am in charge of the tiller, I am keenly aware of the difficulty of our situation. Every time I steer the boat in one direction, a wave picks us up and moves us in another, and I am constantly fighting the power of the seas with our insignificant rudder. The swells have built with the rising tide, possibly to 10 feet, and there is more chop to contend with as the wind fills in. After another couple hours of motoring, I am losing it. The hot Filipino sun, mixed with the engine's exhaust pouring, unfiltered and unmuffled right at me from no more than 6 feet upwind, is making me foggy. I have not been drinking water. All I can focus on is steering. Jake handed me food at one point, but I forgot to eat it. I am starting to feel seasick. The engine is so loud and my energy so low that I do not call out for help. I just keep steering. As I am about to cry from exhaustion, the boat begins to vibrate. Jake turns around and gives me a quizzical look. I have no idea what is making the noise, and honestly, I don't really care at this point. But Jake points to an island off our bow and I start heading in. We scan the shore as we get closer and find a place to stop. I get out the chart as Jake takes a look at our prop. We have landed on Malubit Galubit Island. We are at the mouth of our final crossing. The prop looks all right, but the shaft is tweaked. Jake turns it 180 degrees and bangs on it in hopes of resolving the issue temporarily. I'm not sure if it's the momentum of what we are doing, or that we have already beaten so many odds to make it this far, or that we are both simply stupid after hours of sitting in the hot sun, exposed to raw exhaust, siphoning gas with our mouths every 2 hours, but we decide to keep going. As we leave Malubit Island, we are just hitting max tidal flow. Jake is now steering, and I am sitting in the bow. The shoreline to our left is rocky and wild, with water bursting in all directions. The seas get worse as we get closer in, with rebound waves adding into 2 sets of colliding ocean swells, a strong headwind of at least 25 knots gusting to 40, and an opposing tide. Jake heads us further from the shore, and I am petrified that we have just left our last safe harbor. Turning around at this point is not an option. We have 14 miles to go before we can turn south to run with the wind and the waves along the Palawan coast. I am now more alert than I have been in hours. I quickly scan our boat to locate our ditch bag. I assess that swimming to the east side of Malubit Island is the least risky option. Otherwise, it's the South China Sea or Rocky Madness. Of course, that's assuming I can swim through such rough seas and wind, but I'm fighting to be an optimist at this moment. The swells are so big now that we can no longer see the 3,000-foot peaks that are less than 10 miles away. They must be up to 15 feet, and we are lost in them. As far as we know, we are the only boat out here. As we rise and fall, and rise and rise, and fall in the confused sea state, our boat is torqued from all sides. Sadutz is aching and twisting and complaining as the seas toss her around. I can feel her shifting and shuddering underneath me. Immediately, I am aware of everything that is sketchy about this boat. The thin plywood sparsely held together with some kind of 2-part polyester mixed with paint so that the seams match the color of the boat. A lawnmower engine of unknown age that we have already pushed beyond known limits. A throttle that is made of foam, a nail, and fishing line. Plastic bags shoved around bolts that hold our outriggers together to keep the bolts from shaking. I may be in love with this boat, but it is not a seaworthy vessel. I turn to look Jake directly in the eyes. I am looking for the usual reassurance that I get in these moments, for his calm, comforting smile amidst the turmoil, telling me that I am overreacting, that we are just fine. But I see fear. And this, more than the monstrous swells or the shattering waves or the cracking wind, is what scares me most. After nearly 2 hours of a staggering silence amidst the cacophony of wind, wave, and sputtering engine, trying to dance the boat along the evolving ridgelines of 3 sets of converging seas, we near the end of our crossing. We are expecting conditions to ease when we are met with 2 tide rips coming from opposite directions. I didn't think the boat could twist any more than it already had. Everything begins cracking, and popping. I hear Jake yell over the commotion, but can't make out his words. I turn back with my eyebrows raised, and he yells again, "I'm turning down." We are 2 miles from a protected bay on Palawan Island, and some 200 yards from the tip of the island we are trying to pass, where tide rips are crashing ashore. Jake maneuvers us through the swells, turning down to run with one, and then abruptly up to ride another. I am holding so tightly onto the sides of Sadutz that my hands are cramped and white. My mind is filled with blank noise. And then suddenly, shockingly, we are released. The waves are still huge, eclipsing 800-foot cliffs just 2 miles to port, but they are consistent, and we are running with them, surfing on them into our little bay with just enough speed that we can drop anchor. I am shaking. I reach for Jake. His arms swallow me. I feel massive, like 1,000 helium balloons have exploded in my lungs, like I am floating untethered and magnificent over ocean and earth. I want to scream. I want to eat a good meal. I want to feel the warm Palawan water rush over every inch of my skin. I want to build a shrine for this little lawnmower engine and get a tattoo of Sadutz on my ass. I want to turn Jake inside out just to kiss every part of him. And although I feel an undeserved booming sense of pride for surviving the impossible and a powerful connection to life that defies words, I never want to do what we just did again.
Next up, I'm very excited to introduce Bonnie Obremski. Bonnie is out on the road right now, but she is a Port Townsend resident. She worked as a sailmaker for Carol Hossey here in town for a long time. Bonnie's bio, she wrote that she is proud that she has worked her way down the historic tall ship world, meaning she first started co-owning a charter business. She went on to work on modern cruisers in the Caribbean. And over the next 6 years, she worked and played on big and small boats, old and new, in Key West, Florida. Bonnie has recently started a new business called Storyborn, and she has been performing annual performances titled Heart Stories, and is a featured, which features dozens of artists. We are sorry that she's not here in person today, but we are so excited to hear her story virtually. Please give a warm round of applause for Bonnie Obremski.
When COVID hit, I thought of everything in nautical terms. It was a rogue wave crashing across my decks. I lost my jobs. My mate decided to sail away. As a former sailor, I knew I'd feel at home not in my rented house, but on a voyage. For 6 years, I crewed aboard big boats and little boats, sailboats and motorboats, old boats and new boats along the East Coast, throughout the Caribbean and Great Lakes. Looking back, it feels like gazing into the CGI maelstrom in the Pirates of the Caribbean 3. It's a stormy, whirling, pulse-pounding vortex. It's visceral. The emotions of the experience seem sharp and real, but the details are blurry. And if it's hard to look, it's not just because there were moments of extreme pain, even death. It's also because there was a vibrancy, an aliveness, something precious. And I'm afraid if I look for it now, I might realize it's something I've lost. Lacking a boat because owning a boat is bonkers, I crafted a bunk in the back of my old station wagon. I chucked everything I didn't need overboard and was pleased to find the Ariels of my neighborhood seemed more than happy to add my snarfblats and dinglehoppers to their treasure caverns. My friends shattered dozens of metaphorical bottles of champagne across my bow, blessing my journey again and again. It was almost enough to make me wonder why I was leaving. But my inner compass firmly pointed to the open road. 6 years have gone by since I worked as a sailor full-time. I'm beginning to believe that the mark of that life is indelible. Some late night long ago, my soul clonked an elbow on the cap rail and beckoned for Poseidon to rise up and carve a tattoo deep into the muscle. If I close my eyes, I can still feel the pleasure of its salty sting. My first ocean voyage was in 2008. I had just turned 25 years old. A former classmate invited me to join him and one other friend to deliver a sailboat from St. Martin to Key West. At the time, I was wrapping up a 2-year stint as a daily newspaper reporter for the North Adams Transcript in the Berkshire Mountains of Massachusetts. Most of my boating experience was as a whitewater kayaker. I'd never been to the Caribbean. So I went to Target and bought sailing clothes, white linen drawstring pants, and a new bikini. I went to the library and checked out 6 nautical novels. I was ready. At least I was ready to get what I wanted, which was to be surrounded by beauty, to feel joy and freedom, to bask in the thrill of discovery and exploration and newness. I was far less ready to guard the borders around my happiness. I look back at myself and I want to be her friend then. We would have had so much fun together. She still did have fun, but I'm glad she got to fall in love with all the blues and greens of the tropical sea and the feel of the helm beneath her hands. I'm glad she found her sea legs as the sun rose on that second day. I'm glad she swam wearing nothing but a snorkel and even finished reading those books. As I look back at her, I can see her telling me that, even if we didn't know one another then, we do now. She asks me if I need her to be my friend on this voyage, and I realize I do. She's better than I am at seeing beginnings instead of endings. At the start of June, I drove to the shores of Flathead Lake in Montana. I stayed with my ex-boyfriend's 93-year-old grandfather. His next-door neighbor had 2 stand-up paddleboards and welcomed me to use them, so I did. I paddled, feeling the addictive vertigo of the bottomless depths beneath my feet. I paddled hard, and I made noises that I hoped no one could hear. I marveled at how the mercurial surface of the lake merged with the horizon of the cloud-capped mountain peaks. There I scattered the ashes of a friend too young to be gone, and felt the kind of gratitude toward my body that you feel when you know that something isn't going to last. I remember another young friend lost. He was working aloft in the rig of a competing Key West schooner. He fell. We all drove to Miami to sit vigil, a bandage around his head marked with the words, "No bone." He died a few days later. Then, after a full turn of the seasons, after the news of Hurricane Sandy and the sinking of the Bounty, his parents cast his ashes in a pink salt urn off the stern of our schooner. A few days later, our mainmast came crashing down, and somehow no one died then. We had carved his name into the peak of that mast. It can't hurt to imagine him guiding it down. After 2 weeks at Flathead Lake, the road beckoned again, and I drove to Yellowstone and then Grand Teton National Park. Pulling up to my tent site on the shores of Jackson Lake, it was raining, and I donned the foul weather gear from my sailing days to set up camp. I'd established my routine by then, and soon I pulled breakfast and coffee off my Coleman stove, unbothered by the wet. Suddenly I realized I was happy. It was like a friend visiting, one you didn't realize had been gone a long time, one you didn't realize how much you'd missed. Almost by observing it, it was gone again, but it had been there, which made me believe it could come back. I remember a feeling of euphoria in the summer of 2013 when I signed onto the full-rigged ships to land it as its shipboard director. A school chartered the vessel, and I was testing out an adult program over the summer as the ship toured throughout the Great Lakes. As with anything new, as with anything collaborative, as with anything involving tall ship sailors, there was messiness. Not everyone had a great summer, and I made some choices that led to tough lessons, but somewhere in the middle of it all was a sweet spot, a ripeness. I learned to climb in the rigging, all the way to the Royal Yard, and I loved it fiercely. I loved the ship, my shipmates, the routine of our voyage through the St. Lawrence Seaway, through Lakes Ontario, Erie, Huron, Michigan, and Superior, finally. After 5 years of messing about in boats, I felt like maybe I could be a sailor too. Then the season peaked. One of the more beloved crew members signed off to go live with his girlfriend on a farm. As we all hugged him goodbye, he held me a moment longer and whispered in my ear, "Get out of this business." And I felt like maybe I could also not be a sailor, and that would be perfectly all right too. Following Grand Teton, I decided to make the 9-hour drive to a campground in Capitol Reef National Park. It was nearly 1 a.m. when I tucked into a gas station just outside the park for a few hours of shut-eye. The wind gusted at a near gale. I clambered into my bunk in the back and locked myself inside. The car rocked to and fro, as though I was back on the water, riding 3-foot swells. I closed my eyes and imagined that were true, to comfort myself. In my mind, I returned to the forecastle of the Privateer Lynx, my last and best ship. I signed onto the Lynx on November 4th, 2013 in Gloucester, Massachusetts. I was 30 years old and still getting used to saying that number out loud. Often I'd say 30 as if I were calling out a compass bearing. I'm 37 now, and I think as soon as I get used to it, I'll have to start learning to say 40. The best part about the Lynx, as with any ship, was its crew. I'd have to say one crew member was particularly special because he became my beloved partner for more than 6 years. In February, the sea demanded that he turn his full attention to her. In doing so, he reminded me of a description of sailors I once read in The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. "Their minds are of the stay-at-home order," Conrad wrote, "and their home is always with them, the ship, and so is their country, the sea. One ship is very much like another, and the sea is always the same. In the immutability of their surroundings, the foreign shores, the foreign faces, the changing immensity of life glide past, veiled not by a sense of mystery, but by a slightly disdainful ignorance, for there's nothing mysterious to a seaman unless it be the sea itself, which is the mistress of his existence, and as inscrutable as destiny." The Lynx eventually brought our jolly crew to the docks of Tampa, Florida, and gently set me down on the shores of a non-sailing life. When I think about going back, I think about how nice it was to have a home, friends, good food, structure, purpose, and adventure all wrapped up into a 122-foot package. I think about racing up the Ratlins to loose the sails and to gaze at the sea from 90 feet up in the air. I think about it. I do. After Capitol Reef National Park, I traveled to Bryce Canyon, Zion, and the Grand Canyon. Looking out over the Grand, I thought about a year earlier, when I had acted in a play with an all-female ensemble cast titled Men on Boats by Jacqueline Backhaus. In that play, there was a scene in which the characters, exhausted and bedraggled, still feel awe when they row into the Grand Canyon. The canyon had felt like such a destination on my voyage across the West. But the sight of it wasn't what made me tear up. It was remembering the sunset glow of the stage lights illuminating my castmates. It was remembering as those lights dimmed, it was my job to reach out into the darkness and grip my boatmate's hand so that both of us didn't fall as we walked off stage. When the show closed, I received 2 gifts from cast members inscribed with lines of dialogue my character had spoken. An outlook through the doorway, one said. The other, it's this or higher. I drove into the desert toward Joshua Tree. A few miles before the entrance, on the 2-lane highway, I spotted a car driving headlong in my direction. It was trying to pass a line of cars using my lane, but it wasn't going to make it, and it wasn't backing off. I steered off the road into the deep sand. I avoided getting hit, but when I put my car in reverse, it barely budged. I got out and saw my front tires were buried in the sand. In no time, Good Samaritans came to help. One felt beneath my car for something to affix a tow rope to, but couldn't find anything. Usually there's some kind of ring in there, he said. Then he added, with the hesitation of someone wondering if I would understand, you know, like a boat. Yeah, I knew, although I said nothing. Those years on boats, that maelstrom, it's inside me, possibly forever. It's not something that shows on the outside, in office meetings, on stage, on the side of the road, in the middle of the desert. Sometimes I wonder how something that feels so big can be so invisible. Then I think we all have that, in one way or another. I had a friend read this story a few weeks ago. She asked me if in my time as a sailor I felt as though I had survived something. Yes, I told her. I survived my years on boats. And now it's time to try and survive a global pandemic. So if you see me behind the wheel and you're not sure what you're looking at, look for a sailor. One who feels at home when her needs are simple and she's forced to look where she wants to go in order to get there.
It is my honor to introduce who is sadly not here in person tonight because she no longer lives on this coast, Rachel Slattery. I met Rachel a long time ago and then re-met her as the captain of the schooner Adventurous more recently. She is currently now living in Rhode Island with her husband and her son Milo, running an organic livestock farm. She is, as you'll get to hear in her story, such an incredibly competent mariner. And the more I get to know about Rachel, the more just at ease I feel when she is captaining a boat of 23 teenagers and myself out at sea. So Rachel, we miss you. I hope you're doing well, and I'm very excited to hear your story tonight. Thank you.
So I'm at the top of the dock, having the talk. You know, the one where 22-year-old you tells your sweet boyfriend Tom that you're moving to New Zealand. That way to soften the blow of the breakup. That one. We're crew and adventurous, so we keep working together for a few days. And he comes to me and he says, what if we sail to New Zealand? And I'm thinking, shoot, that's a little bit more we than I meant, but you're sweet, so maybe comes out. And he lays out this plan. We fly to the East Coast and join this family on their 50-foot sloop and sail with them to Australia. We start in the Chesapeake. The first leg would be Chesapeake down to the Caribbean. It's a husband, a wife, a 4-year-old daughter, and the husband's cousin from England. The wife, Shannon, is a commercial airline pilot and just got a job flying the largest airplanes this Australian airline has. She's going to do the weather piloting for the trip, so a major plus is that we could learn that from her. The husband, Mark, is a maritime handyman. He's the guy you call to fix anything. Electronics, engines, whatever. And the cousin is a savvy English Channel sailor. I'm like, nice job, Tom. I'm interested. And so we start to screen them pretty intensely. And they check all the boxes. They've got all the safety gear, harnesses, life jackets, lifeboat, electronic charts, paper charts, satellite phone, single sideband radio, you name it, they've thought of it. So I realized that not only are Tom and I not breaking up, but we're going to fly back east and sail to Australia together. So we arrive in Annapolis, and there's lots of love pouring in from neighbors in the marina. Some bubbly is popped, and I step off to call my mom. Because at this point, I work on boats, my dad works on boats, my brother works on boats, and my mom is like our home office. So I call her and let her know we're going to be getting underway in the morning, and then I'll call her when I can. And she says, You know you don't have to go, right? I'm like, what? Jesus, Mom. And she's like, just listen to your gut, okay? If it doesn't feel right, you don't have to go. And I'm like, Mom, come on. I'm 22. I've asked all the questions. Like, I've got this. It'll be fine. And I become very aware of this churning feeling in my stomach, but I just chalk it up to excitement, the regular old pre-voyage jitters, and tell her I love her, and I'll call her when I can. So we cast lines the next morning, and things are going great until this nasty weather rolls in. And it turns out that things are not as well planned as we thought. So the roller furler fails. In an attempt to sea stow, I get on the very wrong side of Shannon. The English cousin, he turns out to have only sailed a couple of times as rail meat. You know, the people that lean over the side of the boat to keep the boat flat? And he is wicked seasick. There aren't enough harnesses for everyone, and the 4-year-old is now down in the cabin surrounded by pillows watching DVDs. And because Shannon's not that into sea stowing, it's a complete madhouse down below. But we make it. Dawn brings a sense of peace, and there's a celebratory feeling amongst us. And big high fives and big cups of coffee. And Shannon dials in the radio, or dials in the weather report on the SSB radio, and tells us that exactly where we're going to be tomorrow is exactly the last place we want to be in the entire Atlantic Ocean. So she and Mark get in an intense conversation, and Tom and I are like, oh my God, we head up on deck to prep for the heavy weather. As we're coiling lines in the cockpit, I hear from down below, it's not an airplane, Shannon. We can't just fly away from it. So we hurry to finish up our deck prep and add the extra fuel to the tank, bring rail meat in another fresh bucket, reload the 4-year-old's DVDs, and do our very best to sail away from the impending weather. And there's a terrible scream. Shannon's burned herself. She's burned herself bad. And unbeknownst to us at the time, she promptly medicates with a stiff rum drink and a Vicodin. So the already irritated woman in charge of our weather routing is now flying off the hinges. And then the weather rolls in, and it's intense. Mark and Tom and I quickly realize that the reefed mainsail and storm trysail are too much for this weather, and the mainsail agrees by tearing at all the reef points. So we work to bring that down, but the storm trysail is stuck. I know. I could probably figure it out sitting on dry land today too, but it was stuck, and it's nasty, and it's night, but the moon is full, and it feels like the only hope we have of navigating through this storm. The waves have more than doubled in size from when the weather repost came in, and the 3 of us are working our hardest to keep it together and working to wrestle the helm through the night. We're sleeping in the cockpit, and the 3 of us are soaking wet, soaked through our foul weather gear, waves crashing over us. We're rotating through, sleeping in the soul of the cockpit, and gripping the wheel as we're steering. When you couldn't do it anymore, you would kick the next person up and then just pray for rest. I remember thinking, with daybreak, everything will be okay again. But when the sun came up, it became even more obvious just what a mess we were in. Now I could see the nauseating color of foam riding along with us in these mountainous waves. And at the bottom of the trough, all you could see were walls of water on all sides. The 4-year-old was pretty agitated and uneasy below. I envied that her crying and being scared was socially acceptable, but worked really hard to keep it together and keep my face straight, my jaw tight. Shannon's rager had made being on deck in this crazy storm seem safe, and seasick rail meat crawled up the ladder looking for sanctuary, and his eyes met the wall of water behind us, and with this look of terrified disbelief, he just shook his head no and went back down the ladder. He didn't say a word. It was louder now. We were having to shout over the wind and the engine. We're heading to Bermuda, the closest emergency port, and with the whole day ahead of us, we were feeling hopeful. We started to imagine the relief of coming into port, and then The electronics went out. Our radar, our chart plotter, what felt like all of our lifelines. And Mark just poured his attention into it. And nothing. The guy you call to fix anything couldn't fix it. So we scrambled for another minute or so and decided to familiarize ourselves with the historically tricky reefs surrounding Bermuda using the paper charts. And it turns out there aren't any. There are charts, however, for Sydney Harbor, Australia, which isn't exactly helpful for this leg of the voyage. And then, bam! The engine makes this terrible noise. The transmission had ceased, and we could now only operate in astern, or reverse. And we were now turning beam to these mountainous waves, and they were crashing even harder over us. And then time slowed down. I was sitting in the cockpit, taking it all in slow motion, and I noticed Mark with a balled up fist waiting for the next wave. And as it crashes over him, he swings and he punches this wave square in its stupid nose, and he starts shouting things that I cannot repeat during this event. And Tom and I catch each other's eyes, and in a moment of brave clarity, Tom suggests we build a drogue, a thing we had read about once in the deck house of the schooner Adventurous. He took the helm and kept an eye on old Wave Puncher over there, and I braved below decks on a mission to string anything that would drag behind us onto a long line. I had to work quick, because I knew Shannon wouldn't be thrilled to have me taking her pots and pans with intentions of throwing them overboard. So we slung it over the side, and it worked. We slowed down on our downhill runs, and the waves were no longer crashing over the beam. Whew. So we're a disabled vessel with no proper navigational equipment. 6 people on board, 5 adults, 1 child. Rail meat is a legitimate medical concern. Shannon has gone off her rocker and is heavily medicated. Mark's punching waves, and the 4-year-old has now been crying for hours. Tom and I are wondering, how did we end up on a boat where the only thing between us and capsizing are a bunch of pots and pans thrown over the back, tied off the back? So we make the call. Mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday. We spoke with the Coast Guard directly and were told that a crew would be dispatched from South Carolina and expected at our position in 6 to 7 hours, right before dark. That's a long time to sit and wait, hoping things don't get worse. I made mayday call after mayday call, but no vessels responded. The U.S. Coast Guard sent a C-130 plane to us. You know, the ones that fly through hurricanes? But they couldn't find us. We could see them in between heavy clouds, and we had broken radio contact, but it felt like a bad movie scene. Help had arrived, but they couldn't see us. This would have been the moment on the deserted island when that SOS sign you put on the beach would have come in handy. But instead, we had Rail Meat, who had crawled up on deck and laid an emergency signal flag over his chest. His skin had turned green, and I'm not sure if this was his surrender or the best effort he could conjure up, but the C-130 crew did eventually see us. It was unclear, though, if the helicopter would have enough fuel or be able to maneuver in the treacherous conditions, but they expected to be on scene shortly. The pilot of the helicopter made the call to proceed with the rescue, and she deployed the rescue swimmer, but we were sailing way too quickly, and they had to reposition him again, using precious time and fuel. The rescue swimmer, this time, uses the drogue line to hand over hand pull himself through these crazy waves, and then this exceptionally good-looking man lands on our swim platform, and he says, "Hi, I'm Chad. Here's the plan. Women and children first. I will signal you when to jump, and if they don't jump, you need to push them. I will swim you over to the basket. Don't fight me. You'll be hoisted up, and the next will go. We need to do this quick. The kids first." And after a few moments of panic, with Shannon being unwilling to send her child alone, the pilot, also a mother, allowed the two to go together. I was next. I had this moment of anger. Like, seriously? Women and children first is still a thing? I mean, I understand the mom, but I'm part of the crew that fought hard to keep us all alive. Rail Meat's a medical concern. Take him. But I didn't waste the time of arguing, and I'm not sure if I jumped or if I was pushed, but the next few moments seemed to happen in slow motion. It felt like I was drowning, and I tried hard not to fight, but I was gasping for air. And as I caught my breath, I was already up out of the water, crumpled into the bottom of the basket. The crane operator slid the basket in the helicopter, and I rolled out onto the side. It was so loud in the helicopter. I couldn't hear, but I could see the little girl was screaming, and I noticed Shannon was crying, rocking her back and forth. Rail meat was hoisted next, but the basket didn't go back down. They were picking up the swimmer by his harness. They were going to have to leave Mark and Tom and come back to get them after refueling in Bermuda. The sun had nearly finished setting, and I started to lose it. Could the guys even make it through another night? Would they be able to find the boat in the dark? Could the two of them do it without me? I wanted so badly to be down there with them fighting, but even more so, I wanted them to be up here with me, crying. And then the pilot made a call. I somehow heard her calm, southern drawl cut through the noise. Tell him, go get those boys. And Chad was lowered closer to the boat. The basket went back down, and maybe it was luck or divine intervention, but Tom and Mark landed with us in Bermuda that night. The boat was never reported seen again. This isn't a story I really tell. It's held a lot of shame and guilt for me. I suffered for quite a while from the trauma. Nightmares haunted me, and I just wondered how I ended up there. How did I not ask better questions or verify things in person? Sailing forums bashed us for our choices. And in a world of armchair admirals, I've held this story close in fear of judgment. But, I spent 15 years working in the maritime industry, mentoring young, ambitious sailors, and I find myself using my mom's words often. Listen to your gut. If it doesn't feel right, you don't have to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for sharing our very first virtual She Tells Sea Tales Boat Festival Edition evening program with us. When Barb and Angela asked me to do this year, as I said earlier, this is a time for me to be out on the water, and it's really not a time when I usually head inside to share and listen to stories with our main culminating event, which happens in March. But I thought it was important to say yes to this event. And I thought it was important to say yes to this event for a couple of reasons. Our voices are really important. And there's a time right now in our world where hearing our voices, hearing minorities' voices in the maritime industry is really important to me, and that is women. And listening to voices all around us is so exceedingly important. And for me, the work of the Northwest Maritime Center is also extremely important. The work that I've done with She Tells Sea Tales, with the Girls Boat Project, with the Port Townsend School District and the Port Townsend Maritime Academy continues to open up the eyes and minds and hearts and opportunities for young people in our community. So when Barb and Angela asked me to do this event this year, that's why I showed up. I showed up because it's really important that we support the Girls Boat Project to open up the eyes and minds and hearts and opportunities for young women in our community and around our world. But it's also extremely important that we just open up those eyes, minds, hearts, and opportunities for all of our youth in our town, in our region, in our state, and across the country and around the world. So tonight's event was unlike any other She Tells Sea Tales event, honestly, that I hope to experience. It was warm and wonderful, and there's more elbow room than we possibly need. Usually this event is sold out, and it's elbow to elbow, packed in the same room, standing on the same stage, talking into the same microphone. So wherever you are tonight, I hope that you were able to really gain something from our incredible readers. I hope that you make the effort to show up online or in person in March. I hope you make the effort to show up for the people that you care about in your life right now and the causes that you care about in your life. So thank you so much for a wonderful event. Thank you to the Northwest Maritime Center for all of the incredible work that you do, and for our incredible community of the Wooden Boat Foundation and the Wooden Boat Festival. Thank you.